We'll see. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, Chapter 10, The Lord's Return to Jagannath Puri. And we'll read a sequence of verses beginning with verse 18. Okay, so, just a little bit of background. The chapter's titled The Lord's Return to Jagannath Puri, but it begins because there's a particular feature of this chapter is connected with the king, Prataparudra, the king of that area, the Puri area and surrounding areas. He had become extremely inspired by seeing Lord Chaitanya, but he'd never been able to meet with him. At least one reason was, perhaps the main reason, but certainly one reason was that Lord Chaitanya would not meet with royalty or, for that matter, any wealthy, materially powerful people. He just wouldn't meet with them, particularly royalty, which means power and wealth, great fame. So he just avoided them. You know, there's a saying, avoiding like the plague. He really avoided them as if their association was really terrible. But still the king, as a devotee, he really wanted to meet Lord Chaitanya. So the previous chapter was describing Lord Chaitanya's tour of South India. He took sannyas in Katwa, not far from Navadvip, Mayapur. Then he visited the Navadvip area for a few days. And then he went to Jagannath Puri. And then he stayed in Jagannath Puri for a little while. But then he went on a tour of South India for 6 years. Now he's returning. But the way the chapter's structured, I don't know if you were here last week, is that because there's an emphasis here on the king meeting or wanting to meet, or gradually becoming able to meet eventually with Lord Chaitanya. So there's a focus like that. So the chapter begins actually with some exchanges, an exchange between the king and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, before the Lord left, or just as the Lord left, just when the Lord left. And if you are following carefully, you would see that the king asks Sarvabhauma, why did he go? Why did he leave? Why didn't you stop him? Something to that effect. And then suddenly the Lord is returning, just a few verses later. So sometimes the chronology in some sections of Shastra, particularly connected with Lord Chaitanya, sometimes the chronology is slightly a bit unusual to really bring out certain important philosophical or historical points. So here it seems like he just left and now he's just coming back, but actually it was 6 years later. Yes, so what's happening now then is that the Lord is just about to return. He's more or less returned. He's practically returned. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is meeting with the king, and the king, and he's asking him to help make arrangements for the return of the Lord. It's interesting. It appears like one conversation. Why did you let him leave? And now he's returning. But actually there's 6 years in between. So yes, so let us begin then with text 18. Punarapi ihan tanra haile agamana ekabara dekikari sapala nayana. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu returns, I wish to see him just once in order to make my eyes perfect. This is the king. Bhattacharya kaheteno asibe alpakale rahite tanra ekastana chahiye virale. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya replied, His Holiness Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will return very soon. I wish to have a nice place ready for him, a place solitary and peaceful. Takurera nikata ara, haibe nirjane, e mata nirnaya kari, deha eka stani. Lord Chaitanya's residence should be very secluded and also near the temple of Jagannath. Please consider this proposal and give me a nice place for him. Rajakahe, Aiche Kashi, Mishrera Bhavana, Takurera Nikatahaya, Parama Nirjana. The king replied, Kashi Mishra's house is exactly what you require. It is near the temple and is very secluded, calm, and quiet. Etakahi Raja Rahe Utkantita Hana Bhattacharya Kashi Mishre Kahila Asiya. After saying this, the king became very anxious for the Lord to return. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya then went to Kashi Mishra to convey the king's desire. Kashi Mishra kahe ami, bada bhagyavan, mora grihe prabhupadir, habe asvatan. When Kashi Mishra heard the proposal, he said, I am very fortunate that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord of all Prabhus, will stay at my home. So just I don't know if you caught it, but in the Bengali, Kashi Mishra says, "Mora grihe in my house, Prabhu Padera." The Lord, well, Prabhu, he's referring to Lord Chaitanya as Prabhupada, Of course, we're extremely familiar with this term. Prabhupadera, that era means of that Prabhupada. He will stay at my home. So, purport by Srila Prabhupada. It's an interesting purport, and it's an important purport in regards to the use of this term, Prabhupada, which we're very familiar with. Purport. In this verse, the word Prabhupada, referring to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is significant. Regarding this, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada comments, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, Sri Krishna, and all his servants address him as Prabhupada. This means that there are many Prabhus taking shelter under his lotus feet. The pure Vaishnav is addressed as Prabhu. And this address is an etiquette observed between Vaishnavas. When many Prabhus remained under the shelter of the lotus feet of another Prabhu, the address Prabhupada is given. Sri Nityananda Prabhu and Sri Advaita Prabhu are also addressed as Prabhupada. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Advaita Prabhu, and Sri Nityananda Prabhu are all Vishnu Tattva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu. Therefore, all living entities are under their lotus feet. Lord Vishnu is the eternal Lord of everyone, and the representative of Lord Vishnu is the Lord's confidential servant. Such a person acts as the spiritual master for neophyte Vaishnavas. Therefore, the spiritual master is as respectable as Sri Krishna Chaitanya or Lord Vishnu himself. For this reason, the spiritual master is addressed as Om Vishnupad or Prabhupada. The Acharya, the spiritual master, is generally respected by others as Shripad. And the initiated Vaishnavas are addressed as Prabhu. Prabhupada, and Vishnupad are described in revealed scriptures like Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat. In this regard, these scriptures present evidence accepted by unalloyed devotees. The Prakrita Sahajiyas are not even worthy of being called Vaishnavas. They think that only caste Goswamis should be called Prabhupada. Such ignorant Sahajiyas call themselves Vaishnav Das Anudas, which means the servant of the Vaishnavas. However, they are opposed to addressing a pure Vaishnav as Prabhupada. In other words, they're envious of a bona fide spiritual master who is addressed as Prabhupada, and they commit offenses by considering a bona fide spiritual master an ordinary human being or a member of a certain caste. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur describes such Sahajiyas as most unfortunate. Because of their misconceptions, they fall into a hellish condition. Let us read the verse again. Kashi Mishra kahe ame, bada bhagyavan, mora grihe prabhupadera, habe avastan. When Kashi Mishra heard the proposal, he said, I'm very fortunate that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord of all Prabhus, will stay at my home. Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschyatyadesha Tarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Rama, Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha Patidanam bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna. So, as we saw, the verse itself, in the verse itself, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is using the term Prabhupada for Lord Chaitanya as a term of address for Lord Chaitanya through the mouth of Kashi Mishra. So, Shri Radha Radhanath Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Giri Govardhan Ki. So, and then in the purport, Prabhupada went to some lengths to elaborate on the use of that term. It is not sort of your everyday term in the sense you don't use it just for regular address or like that. Although, of course, we every day and many times a day we address Prabhupada like that, but amongst ourselves and our own discussions focused on ourselves and our immediate associates, Prabhupada is a special term. It's a very special term to be used only under special circumstances for special people, or even very special people. Just like for Lord Chaitanya, the term Mahaprabhu is used. Mahaprabhu, the great master. On occasion, Lord Nityananda is addressed as Mahaprabhu, because he's great personality, the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, or at least his immediate expansion. And so arguably, the term can be used for Lord Nityananda, and it is used on occasion, but nothing like how it's used for Lord Chaitanya. It's really completely different in terms of quantitatively how many times the term is used for Lord Nityananda as opposed to for Lord Chaitanya. It's just used practically every time, very often for Lord Chaitanya. So you find a little discussion on that subject, that the difference in the use of the terminology for Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. And the point, the essential point which is made is that even though they're essentially on the same level, but still Lord Chaitanya has a more special position. He is the master of Lord Nityananda, and it's not exactly the same, really. So So therefore, on analysis, the conclusion is we will use this term for Lord Chaitanya particularly, even though maybe under certain circumstances it can be used, and it is used a bit, for Lord Nityananda. So there's a type of accent given to these terms of glorification. They call them technically honorifics, honorific terms. There are levels, there are different gradations. Anyway, so here, Prabhupada, of course, is being focused on, and Lord Chaitanya is being addressed as Prabhupada. Well, I could mention also the use of the term Bhagavan. Bhagavan is there, and literally the term translates Bhagyavan, Bhagya or Bhaga, meaning opulence, and Van, meaning one who possesses. Ultimately, all opulence. So who is that? That is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, very specifically. But at the same time, or from time to time, we see even in Srimad Bhagavatam, which is, you could say, the most authoritative literature, on a few occasions other personalities are addressed right there in the text of the Bhagavatam itself as Bhagavan. It's used for Narada Muni here and there, not many times, but it is used. It's used for Shukadev Goswami. Narada Muni, at least, is a Shakyavesh avatar. He's a type of form of the Lord. Shukadev Goswami is not, really. You won't really find him listed in the lists of avatars. Of course, he's an extremely great devotee, but still little different from Narada Muni. But still he is addressed as Bhagavan. Even Lord Brahma sometimes, under certain circumstances. But in all these different cases, because these are very specific and very special honorific terms, and they are generally intended for, and even most specifically apply in a literal sense to forms of the Lord himself. So the usage in regards to others is very limited, and only if they're just, you could say, super special personalities. So and we see it's just an interesting little sort of historical or technical literary point in Bhagavad Gita. Whenever Lord Krishna starts to speak, it's a conversation, it's more Krishna, but it's sometimes Arjuna says something. And then after that, Krishna starts speaking again. So you'll find that pretty much, if not in every case, and it may actually be in every case, when Lord Krishna starts to speak again, there having been a little sort of point raised by Arjuna, then it says Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, because it's an honorific term of a specific nature with a particular meaning, and when it's used in the most specific and proper sense, it's for the Supreme Lord, and even ultimately for Lord Krishna himself. It's just an interesting point. You don't see, it's not there in Bhagavad Gita, that when Krishna starts speaking, that Vyasadeva states Sri Krishna Uvacha. It's not there. It's just not there. It's always Sri Bhagavan, because it's referring to him as God. And, Krishna is a popular name. If you go to India, if you go to Chatsworth, I think in Chatsworth, there are many Krishnas. But they're not that one. So Krishna can be used more flexibly, or is used more flexibly, it appears, like historically, going back. But Bhagavan is not really used so flexibly. I remember, I've been mentioning this for the last few weeks here and there. I was in Mauritius a couple of years ago, and I met one young fellow, sort of 20s, young fellow, devotee, nice young fellow. So I asked him, "What's your name?" And he answered, "Krishna." And I said, just joking, of course, "Really? I've been looking for you for years." Well, that's true, actually, but in another sense. So here the term Prabhupada is used. Prabhu meaning master, pada meaning feet, foot or feet. So Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Lord. He's addressed here as Prabhupada. That master, I mean, the sort of developed, little bit more developed meaning is that master or that person at whose feet other masters sit, or even all other masters sit. It's along those lines. And of course, that is Lord Chaitanya. In the most complete sense possible, he is just absolutely Prabhupada under all circumstances, in all places, at all times, in any particular situation. As Prabhupada mentions, that Lord Nityananda and Lord Advaita Acharya, they're also sometimes addressed as Prabhupada. But when they were in the direct company, face to face, of Lord Chaitanya, they would not be addressed as Prabhupada. It would be reserved for him. But in a little bit broader sense, when they're on their own and surrounded by many who, of course, are taking shelter of them, then the term Prabhupada could be used like appropriately. So, as Prabhupada says, and it's an interesting point, listen to this, although we already read it. The pure Vaishnav is addressed as Prabhu. Haribol. Prabhus. Anyway, it's just an interesting point. I certainly one way we should take it is that we'd better come to the point of being pure Vaishnavas, or better be, because this term Prabhu, there's even a conversation of Prabhupada's, some interaction with Prabhupada, who says that it's very good to address other devotees as Prabhu, our Prabhu, but we should not think that we are the Prabhus, the masters. Why did he not address me as Prabhu? That was inappropriate. He should have addressed me as such. Yeah. So certainly if one is being addressed, if one is being treated in any particular capacity, then you could say it behooves one to be worthy at least as much as possible. Yeah. If you're being addressed and treated in some sort of special way in regard to some special consideration, like you're the boss or the manager or the this or the that, then it behooves you to come up, to be up to that standard. Otherwise, well, it's, you could say in a sense, it's a rasa basa. It's an incorrect, inappropriate mixing of mellows or just conceptions. It really is. So, just in a very sort of down-to-earth sense, if one is a grihasta, or let us start by saying, if one is a brahmachari or brahmacharini, and they're presenting themselves as such, dressed as such, and people are treating, at least devotees are treating them as such, then it behooves them to maintain certain standards of celibacy and not have sort of like a looseness in their behavior or even in their consciousness. And if one is a householder, a married person, a grihasta, and of course they're being treated as such, and that's what they're meant to be in terms of varnashram, then it behooves them to maintain standards of, for example, great faithfulness to their spouse. If they're even mentally just sort of, the mind is wandering off sometimes and contemplating another man or another woman, then this is an improper type of condition for a grihasta to be in. Grihasta means one husband, one wife. As it's said about Lord Ram, he was sort of very much into ones. He had one wife. If there was any subject, because, he's ruling class, he's king, so if there's any subject, he has one word. Not that he says one thing to you and then another thing to someone else, as is so crazily common nowadays amongst our not highly respected, and usually for very good reason, politicians. And if there was an enemy, he had one arrow, and that was it. Simple. Yeah. And there were other things also. Not like I was reading actually a while ago about modern day politicians, that some of them at least, they say, they're asked a question, what about this? What are you going to do about this? Or something like that. And they say, well, on one hand, something. And then they say, but on another hand, something else. But on other hand, some other thing. And this person, it was not a devotee, was writing and saying, these people need multiple hands because there are all these on other hands coming up. So maybe they need sort of like some demigods, 8 hands, 10-armed Durga. So yeah, Prabhu, so we were saying, Prabhupada's saying, the pure Vaishnav is addressed as Prabhu. And of course, I think we all know, basically everyone at least who's familiar and involved in Krishna consciousness knows that this is just what we do, isn't it? Even sort of in a very traditional sense, a husband is addressed by the wife not by name, but as Prabhu, my master. And the wife is addressed by the husband also not by name, but as Devi, goddess, as goddess. You've got to be pretty high to be a goddess. Yeah. But this is the tradition. And, traditions are traditions, but in terms of like the actual meaning when you go into things, that if someone is addressing you as master, highly respectful term, and if they're doing it properly, then it's just reflecting their consciousness. Well, then you, Prabhu, you'd better manifest the qualification. And if you're not, because it's not easy to be a paka brahmachari or brahmacharini, to be a paka grihasta, vanaprastha, what to speak of sannyasi, it is not easy. It's not just, it's the next step, okay. It's not easy, but there is a very deep responsibility, very profound, to actually uphold the relevant standards. So, yes, a Prabhupada then, a person who is addressed as Prabhupada, is someone who is the shelter in a spiritual sense of many Prabhus, many people who are actually spiritually very qualified. They're really very qualified people. They're really solidly situated transcendentalists. But to be a Prabhupada means that your feet, the lowest part of the body, and one of the dirtiest parts, are the shelter of those who are Prabhus, those who are actually, they have considerable spiritual qualification. So that's really something. And as Prabhupada mentions here, Lord Chaitanya can be addressed like that, Nityananda, Advaita sometimes, and we sometimes find Jiva Goswami, for example, Srila Jiva Goswami is addressed as Prabhupada. Srila Rupa Goswami is addressed as Prabhupada. Different of these devotees are addressed as Prabhupada. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was addressed as Prabhupada, and Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami is addressed as Prabhupada. Yes, because they're giving shelter to those who are spiritually qualified. That's the specific sense. So that shelter, what does that shelter mean? Well, it's sort of like, sometimes in fact, the example is given of the material world being like a forest fire which is blazing. And of course, forest fire, if you're caught in such a situation, is extremely dangerous, and at the very best, it's extremely uncomfortable, but it's also very dangerous, and you can easily be destroyed. So the material world is sometimes compared to a forest fire, and it's like that. If you look in certain terms how things are working, and actually everyone is being destroyed. Every single person, every single living entity is being destroyed. And for that matter, at least from the Vedic scriptures we understand, in the material world, not only is every living entity being destroyed, but even the whole material world is being destroyed. in due course. So the material world is a place of distraction in which people are born, living entities are born, and even itself is manifested. And the ultimate, what will happen ultimately is that everyone and everything is going to be destroyed. And in the meantime, certain things go on, of course. So many things go on. But they're all just steps towards distraction. No matter how optimistic people may be, that yes, first of all, we'll get good qualification in university, at least nowadays. In my youth, it wasn't really, it was nice, but it wasn't that essential. But now, got to have a degree, then you get your career, and you start getting your money, then you get your family and all your facilities of house, etc., and then you have your children, and it all goes on. And everyone is generally quite absorbed, even to extremely or fully absorbed in that whole program of development. But then how does it all end? It ends with distraction. And in the meantime, in a sense, people, living beings, are just sort of filling in time before the ultimate reality and what it's all about and what it's sort of designed for comes into effect. That is distraction. So forest fire, place of destruction, which in the meantime you can do certain things with, and certain things are quite pleasant, but they're all just, you're on the route to distraction. So Prabhupada, the idea of Prabhupada is that someone who is serious about dealing with this whole process of distraction and coming to a higher level, a spiritual level, transcendental level above and beyond the whole process of distraction, which is this material world, such a person can find shelter from all that by placing themselves at the lotus feet of a Prabhupada. So, sometimes I've seen at least the example being used of an umbrella. It's raining hard. You need an umbrella. You're under the umbrella, you're sheltered. You're sheltered. It's not such a brilliant shelter, but it's better than nothing. So like that, through taking shelter, we use the term shelter, through taking shelter of a Prabhupada or some considerably more advanced devotee, one gets sheltered from the onslaught, the fire, etc., of this material world. And so what does that shelter mean? What does it feel like? How does it work? Is that, one thing it doesn't mean is that your body, which is otherwise destined for destruction, is now not going to be destroyed, as many people would like to think, because many people who are religiously minded, they have some sort of idea of not having to die. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, because we are not these bodies. These bodies are just vehicles, and they're part of the program. They're actually part of the material nature. So they exhibit all the qualities of the material nature, including coming to distraction. But it means that one comes to the transcendental platform, the spiritual platform, where ultimately the person is not affected by even death, because we're all eternal, living, spiritual persons ultimately. And when, as Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita in chapter 2, verse 13, that Denosman yata dehe komaram yovanam jara tata dehantara praptiya dhiras tatra na muyati. Dhiras, the person who's come to a spiritual level, then in those situations of birth and death, from childhood to youth to old age and then death, which the verse is talking about. But dhira, the spiritually minded person, dhiras tatra, in the middle of all that, na muyati, is not affected. This, of course, is an advanced level, but certainly it's a fact that a person who's spiritually realized, when the time of death of the body comes, they're not affected at all. Not at all. Any more than one is affected by changing clothes on a daily basis. So this is the shelter. And how does the shelter happen? The shelter happens through knowledge, through understanding, and through being engaged in activities which give realization of the knowledge. It's not simply academic to learn things, but being engaged in the practical activities of a process which give realization. So Prabhupada goes on to mention that such a person who's able to give shelter may be addressed in different ways. Prabhupada uses the term Prabhupada, he uses the term Vishnupad, he uses the term Shripad. These are all terms, honorific terms, which may be used or be appropriate for such a spiritual master. Prabhupada then goes on to go into it's actually a more specific kind of perspective on the use of these terms in terms of their application in the current day and age, or if not exactly the current day and age, but at least when Prabhupada was personally present. Because you may be aware, I imagine you're aware, that there is a vast scope of misunderstanding of what is spiritual advancement, and the idea of advancement being determined sort of irrevocably for this lifetime means it can't be changed just in terms of your birth. This rather fantastic misunderstanding is just rampant, particularly if you go back a little while in India, but even to this day, to still quite some extent, it is rampant. And therefore, only those who are born in certain families could function as spiritual authorities or spiritual masters, and therefore be addressed as Prabhupada or Vishnupad, these honorific terms. So this is rampant. This is just incredible. It was unbelievably rampant. Now it's just kind of, what would you say, from unbelievable to fantastic? A step down. It's not as rampant. It was totally almost totally rampant. Now it's just largely rampant, something along those lines. And so it happens. You know, if you just look a little bit into Vaishnavism outside of our specific line, you just look a little bit, you'll see that's the way they think. It is the way that they think. Yes. And someone may just be working in an ordinary job during the day, but on the weekend he's doing a bit of preaching, some initiations and things, and he's being addressed as Prabhupada or Vishnupad, and being regarded as being like that, on that level. These things are actually going on to this day. Oh yeah, it's spiritually, it's a bit of a jungle out there actually, like Vrindavan. It's very nice, and there are many nice temples and deities, but you go a little deeper and you see, oh, it's a jungle. It's just really a jungle. Prabhupada refers here in the purport to these people thinking that only caste Goswamis, people who are born in such a family, a Brahmin family, historically, traditionally Brahmin family, should be called Prabhupada and should be able to perform those functions of acting particularly as a spiritual master or spiritual leader, and nobody else. And as Prabhupada mentions, they're opposed to addressing a pure Vaishnava as Prabhupada. Take a wild guess who Prabhupada is referring to. Actually, he's referring to his own experience. He's referring to his own experience. That in that sense, Prabhupada was not from a Brahmin family or a caste Goswami family. He's from a sort of a Vaishya family. So therefore, just by definition, and it's like a lifelong ban. Yeah, a lifelong ban. You can't do that. You can't be addressed, seen like that. You can't. Just because you were born in that situation. Prabhupada gave the very interesting example that if in some family the father is a brain surgeon, any sort of doctor perhaps, but particularly some highly specialized type of medical role. So if the father is a brain surgeon, but the son isn't interested, he'd rather just do something else, and he is doing something else. Does that mean that if you have a brain problem, maybe if you have a tumor or something, and the father's not available, just go to the son, because he's the son of the brain surgeon? People are what they are. Yes. So if someone is actually highly spiritually advanced, and due to their spiritual advancement, they're transforming the lives of others and helping others to become actually spiritually advanced, well, what does it mean? It means they're spiritually advanced. And so therefore they should be seen like that and treated like that. And that will be highly beneficial for those who take shelter of them. So like this, you get all these people who are very much in a person is defined by their birth only type of mood, who they become angry. That they become angry when special respect is given to someone spiritual respect to someone who's not born in that line, in that sort of family, they get angry. Prabhupada was accused back in those days of corrupting Vedic culture. Yeah, corrupting Vedic culture. By initiating, giving Brahminical initiation, what to speak of giving sannyas to Westerners who, just in terms of birth, are sort of, it's terminal. It's terminal. Just as our physical condition is terminal. So if you're defined by your birth, then it's terminal. That's it. You hold that designation until you reach the time of death. So Prabhupada was accused like that, even very sort of, extremely strongly, very, very strongly. You know that you may have heard it was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's disappearance day the other day. He actually accepted a few Westerners, although it was just a handful, but so many local Indian people from whatever type of background. Brahmins were there, but Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and plenty of Sudras, and he initiated them and gave them Brahminical initiation, even sannyas in some cases, to people who are from Sudra backgrounds by birth. And the resistance against it was so strong that one time when he took a parikrama party, a whole gathering of hundreds or thousands of his followers, to Vrindavan, then, two things happened. One was some of the most famous temples closed when they entered the town. They closed, wouldn't let them in, and only reopened after they'd left. But the most extreme was that some of them made a plot to have him assassinated because he's giving initiation, Brahminical initiation, and even sannyas to people who are from Sudra or Vaishya backgrounds. It's a bit drastic, isn't it? It's a bit drastic. As Prabhupada says, they're envious. They become envious of someone who is actually bona fide in terms of spiritual realization and spiritual standard. So it was actually the case. Some of those temples, when we visit Vrindavan, some of those temples that we visit and our devotees visit like daily, the most famous temples, and they welcome us, or at least they accept us, and they happily accept our money. Some of them, they closed their doors to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and his group. So because they're actually thinking in those terms, you got to be born in a certain family, and when you are, whatever the family is, that's it. That's what you are till the day you die. So Prabhupada makes a very strong statement here at the end of this purport that those sahajiyas, those people who think like this, they're most unfortunate, and because of their misconceptions, they fall into a hellish condition. Yeah, that's a very strong statement. They fall into a hellish condition because of their offenses. Offenses based on misconceptions. So, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki. Any comments or questions? Maharaj, any words of wisdom or correction? He's giving you the microphone. Anyone else? Madhya. Hare Krishna.
We see in the seventh canto, Kashipu is addressed as Shri Hiranyakashipu Uvacha. So you have a comment on that?
If you want me to, we can. You know, he's a very special, extremely extraordinary person because he is Jai. He's one of the gatekeepers of Vaikuntha. He's an associate of the Supreme Lord. And just for the purpose of the pastime of the Lord, he was placed in that position as Hiranyakashipu. Yeah. You know, according to, in Krishna Sandar, or no, I think Bhakti Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami, there's a discussion of that whole pastime, how it happened, yeah, how it came to that, and then what happened when they came. And according at least to a certain translation, you know, Sanskrit being a very extremely difficult language, shall we say, according to a certain translation, it says they had spiritual bodies when they were here as Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. And therefore he was able to fight against the Lord so strongly in a completely different way from any sort of normal demon. So, yeah, but at the very least, he's an extremely special personality in an extremely special situation for the purpose of the pleasure of the Supreme Lord only, really. Is that okay? Well, who said it? Anyway, it's okay. Someone. Some big person. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki